Welcome to Spirit Sisters, where we gather around the virtual hearth to share sacred stories about our life journeys. I'm Karina Machado, and it's my life's passion to share stories that remind us that we're all connected and that love endures beyond the physical realm. I explored those themes in my book Love Never Dies. Doing the research, I had the privilege of interviewing a writer whose presence really left an impression on me. That writer was Mary Lou Stevens. At the time, we spoke about her experiences of connection with the spirit of her father, and since then I've watched her evolve into a best-selling novelist of historical fiction. It's so inspiring to me. But beyond that success, there's a journey that weaves together meditation, recovery, creativity, and an ongoing relationship with the unseen. In her latest novel, The Hobart Hotel, Mary Lou takes readers across continents, including to Uruguay, the country of my birth. So that makes our conversation extra special for me today. We also talk about writing, of course, but what we also touch on is what it means to listen inwardly, to follow the subtle nudges of our intuition and the rewards of making meaning from spiritual experiences. We also explore a theme that's always close to my heart, that storytelling is a bridge between the visible and the invisible, the past and the present, and the person we were and the person we're becoming. Enjoy my conversation with the wonderful Mary Lou Stevens. And if you're enjoying Spirit Sisters, I'd love you to rate and review the show, subscribe on YouTube, and share comments, feedback. Let me know what you think. I'm always interested in hearing from you, and actually it's always a privilege. Thank you. Hi Mary Lou, welcome to Spirit Sisters.
Hello. It's been a long road you and I have been on together, so it's nice to connect like this.
It's really lovely to connect like this, and as you say, it's been a journey, it's been a camino, and it's so lovely to have gotten to know you in this way, where we were just saying before pressing record, we hadn't actually met face to face. So I have a few connections like that, where it's kind of almost like an old-fashioned correspondence, like a pen pal, but
Yeah.
someone becomes very dear, and you're certainly one of those friends. Thank you, Mary Lou, for making the time to join us today.
And we have connected in all kinds of different ways, and the latest way is an unexpected one, and I think we'll be talking about that a bit later.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So we first connected back in 2013 when I interviewed you for my book, Love Never Dies, which came out the following year. Now, I can't remember how we came to be in touch, but you had stories to share. And I think you reached out to me. I think you emailed me. You might have seen maybe an article that I was named in or something, but you
I
sent
can tell
me.
you,
Oh,
sorry, I
you
can tell you
remember?
exactly how it happened.
Oh, you amazing thing. Tell us.
We had the same agent, and she put out an email saying that you were writing this book and you were after stories, and if anyone had a story that might suit your book, to please get in touch with you. And I thought, okay, I will do that. Yeah.
I had completely forgotten that we'd shared the same agent at one point. Wow,
Yeah.
how fantastic. Okay. And we've been chatting ever since, on and off, and sometimes many years might elapse in between, but we tend to pick up where we left off quite easily. So when you think about where you were back then in 2013, what's changed for you? What's different?
2013, I was still working at the ABC. My memoir, Sex, Drugs, and Meditation, had just been released. That was released in April 2013. And it was an interesting time. Before I signed the contract, my husband and I actually had to sit down and have a chat about whether we'd go ahead with it or not. And that had to be a group decision because I could have got sued, we could have lost the house, I could have been fired. There was a lot in that book that could have caused those things to happen. So it was a very interesting time just seeing how it was, how people and my workplace responded to it. So it was, I'm not going to say high anxiety, but it was certainly high energy time for me. And since then, just about everything has changed. I didn't get fired. I didn't get sued. We were very careful, the legal team and I, with that book. Um, but since then, I've left the ABC. I've had 4 novels published, and my husband and I travel the world full time. So we got rid of everything. We sold up everything except our little home, which is rented out. And yeah, we people say, "Oh, where do you live?" And I say, "Everywhere and nowhere." And that's our life.
It's beautiful, and as your friend and connection on social media, I get to see a lot of the wonderful places that you travel to and live vicariously through you. So it's fantastic. So when I was drafting these questions and I asked that about what's changed, I then went back and had a look at our transcript from our interview back then. And yes, as you mentioned, you talked about your memoir, which was, I think, coming out not long after we connected, did our interview. And then you said to me, "Oh, and I've written a novel, but that's gone nowhere." And I had a chuckle because since then you've definitely gone somewhere. Your
Mm.
latest novel, The Hobart Hotel, has only just come out and it zoomed straight into the top 10, Mary Lou, which is an
Mm.
astonishing feat. And it's just yet further confirmation that you're becoming one of Australia's best loved and best selling novelists, which is, can you even believe it?
I'm kind of going, yeah, really? Me? Yeah, it's hard to believe, quite honestly. Yeah.
It's amazing. And we do have, there's a thread connecting us within the Hobart Hotel, which we'll talk about later, as well as just your writing practice in general and the spiritual and the mystical dimension of writing, which I would love to explore with you. But before we do, I think we need to fill in our audience on the spiritual experiences that I guess that led you to connect with me in the first place. I'd love you to revisit those and talk to us about the spiritual role, the role that that spirituality and these experiences play in your life. But let's start with a simple question. When is the first time you realized, Mary Lou, that there's something more to life beyond the physical?
I don't know if it was a realization. I actually think it was foisted upon me by my mother. Sorry. And there is a lot about this in my memoir. My upbringing was unusual, to say the least. My mother was what I think what would be now called Pentecostal, but back then it was called charismatic Christian. So there was lots of speaking in tongues and praising the Lord, and a lot of going to big rallies. And it was a weird kind of connection with the spiritual. I mean, she was a Christian, Church of England, but within the charismatic community, there would be people from all kinds of mainly Christian backgrounds. Yeah, actually, all Christian backgrounds because you're praising the Lord and it's all Jesus stuff. Um, and it wasn't all good, to be quite frank. I like to think that spirituality is all good, that it's a connection with the divine, with light. However, um, and I went to a Pentecostal service because I've got a friend who's a Pentecostal, not so much anymore, actually. This was a while ago. And the sermon was all about the devil. And I thought, gosh, they're still doing this. So within that realm, there's a lot of focus on the darkness, on the devil. My mother used to say the devil loves it when you don't believe in him because that's how he gets in. And I'm being fed this stuff from a very young age, and it did affect me very deeply. It was like the boogeyman that I carried with me into my adult life. So I was aware of both the light and the dark, and that manifested in a very strange way in me as a child, in that I heard voices. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I would hear these really dark murmurings in my head, and then I would hear these very light, gentle, safe, encouraging voices. So, of course, as a kid, I equated that with the devil and angels, but I had them both going on. So it wasn't all good. And much later on, I actually I became a lifeline counselor, And we had a big kind of confab, if you like, with guest speakers. And one of them I really connected with. And I said, I used to hear voices as a child, um, and it really affected me. And he said, I hear that. I hear that all the time. And he said, are you a creative person? And I said, yes. And he said, it's very common with creative people to hear voices. And I don't hear them anymore, but I have since discovered that there is a whole community out there of people who do hear voices, even as adults. It's quite a big thing. But as a child, I could never hear what I could never understand what they were saying. Um, so yeah, it was a very different spiritual slash religious time in my life. And the spirit realm came to me in different guises, not always pretty.
Thanks for sharing that. And as you were like casting your mind back to that time, it reminded me of all the many interviews I did for my three books, but primarily Spirit Sisters, when I began to gather this kind of data and anecdotal data, which is still so significant. And so many of the women who later, went on to identify as a psychic medium or to declare that they were or feel that they had these talents had that experience in childhood of hearing the voices too.
Mm.
And it's no surprise to me that you heard the dark murmurings because, as you say, like you were the developing ego of Mary Lou was being fed fear. And
Mm.
so, of course, that's going to be reflected back. But it's lovely that you had the softer voice of
Mm.
of truth. We could speculate truth. I always find that the voice for love, for the divine, is so soft,
Yeah.
and the intuition, like it's even a nudge, like an inner nudge to know something, is so very soft. And I think that's where meditation or a practice to calm the mind helps so that we can hear it because the other voices will drown it out. The voices of fear, of life, everything that's coming at us from the external.
Mm. Well, of course, living and growing up in the household I did, um, possession by the devil was, considered a very real thing. So
Mm.
I actually didn't dare tell anyone that I was hearing voices in case they tried to exorcise me. You know, I'm 8, 9 years old, and then that idea terrifies me. So it wasn't until much later that I told people that I was hearing voices. Yeah.
There was something though that you did share with your mum when you were a little girl that made her think you were a prophet. Tell us about that.
I had a dream. And I still remember it still so clear, and I was only 8. And I was with a group of friends on the beach, and suddenly all the water disappeared. It all went out back into the ocean. And we were all like, oh, look at that, look at that. And then it all rushed back in. So it wasn't until I was much older that I found out about tsunamis, and that's how they work. I had no idea, no concept of a tsunami at all. I had this dream when I was young, and that's what happened. All the water disappeared, and then it came back in a mighty wave, and we were watching this wave come towards us, and we all started praising God. We weren't scared, we weren't worried, we didn't try to run or get to higher ground. I guess in this dream it was some kind of miracle. I don't know. But we just all started praising God. I was so thoroughly indoctrinated when I was a kid into that whole praise God stuff. But that's what happened in this dream. And I told my mum, and she went, praise God, praise God. You're a prophet. You're seeing the future. You're seeing the end of this world and how we Christians will respond because we are the chosen ones. Yes. So she decided because of that one dream, I was a prophet. Turns out I was not. So a bit later on, she decided that I was a healer because these are all very desired gifts of the spirit within that community. And she wanted me to be gifted. I wasn't really. And I certainly didn't tell her about the voices.
It's a fine line, isn't it? The gift of the spirit, because the voices that could be perceived as a gift of the spirit as well if you're hearing angelic voices and the divine, but you dare not share just in case it goes the other way.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. So you referenced before the experiencing both the light and the it's sort of the shadowy elements of the spirit manifesting, of the spirit world manifesting in your life. And one of the things that we talked about in our initial interview for my book, Mary Lou, was about you experiencing your father's presence after he passed, and just what
Yeah.
a gift that was for you,
Mm.
and everything that it helped. It helped you heal. I remember you saying that it had a tangible, your father's presence after his passing in your life had a tangible effect of getting you on the right track in life. I remember you saying that to me. And I wonder if you could take us back to the first moment that you felt that dad was still with you.
It was phenomenal. It really was. My dad, while he was alive, was a lovely man, an incredibly gentle man, but he was also a hidden man. There was so much about him we didn't know, so much that I didn't find out until later in life. Um, and that he carried a lot of emotional pain, a lot of emotional pain. His mother abandoned him and his two brothers when they were very young. It was a huge scandal in Hobart. It's the kind of thing that mothers did not do. It even made the newspaper. Um, and his younger brother, who was so young at the time, never really recovered. And he was emotionally and damaged and had mental health issues all his life because of it. My dad did the best that he could. And this is all stuff I didn't find out till later. But also, he was very sick for a long time towards the end of his life. He was only 61 when he died. And so he was also in a lot of physical discomfort. So he had, the emotional pain that he'd carried all his life and this physical discomfort. And honestly, when he died, oh my goodness, it was the most extraordinary experience. I actually felt him looking after me fully, completely for the first time in my life because he no longer had any kind of pain. He was no longer carrying a burden. He was free of all of that and he was available for the first time. And I really felt him looking after me very, very strongly. So much so, I was driving down a major street in Sydney and I just heard him say, stop. And, you know, it was big set of traffic lights. I was the first in line. The white line was way ahead of me. And I thought, this is weird, but I'm just going to stop. So there was all this space between me and where the lights were. And next thing I know, this car comes careening across the road into the space where my car would have been. And I was just astounded. It's like, okay, thanks, Dad. Good on you. That's great. I know. So there was a physical manifestation of this heartfelt love that I did experience from him after he died. It was just so beautiful to feel so looked after and that he was now free and capable of actually loving me completely and taking care of me, which he wasn't capable of truly when he was alive because of all the baggage and burdens that he had.
That is so profound, and it's such a fresh, and we could even call it a revolutionary perspective, even, Mary Lou, about death, because you're saying that for the first time you felt that your father was available, emotionally available to you, but yet he's not with us in the physical anymore. But what you're offering is an invitation for us to look at death in a completely new way. And
Mm,
I love these conversations that indicate that relationships can continue to evolve and actually improve following the death of one of the parties. And I just find that it's so countercultural in many ways. Our society, especially our Western world, fears death still.
yeah.
And a lot of it is still very hidden. behind the scenes things. But I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's really beautiful. And yeah, like what a manifestation of care. He saved your life potentially in that moment.
Yeah. And that's not to say I didn't miss him and I didn't grieve him. I
Mm.
certainly did. I was very sad about his passing. I wrote a song because I was playing in bands at the time. My band wanted to perform it, but 2 years later after his death, I could not sing that song without crying. And I think the biggest gift that I've been given about the death of a loved one and that grief is that it never goes away. You know, we expect it to pass 6 months, 12 months. It's like 2 years and I'm still crying. It's like it's okay. It never goes away. We feel that loss. So I had both things going on. It's interesting. This is turning into an interview about dichotomy, but I think that's life, really. There's always more than one side to everything.
Exactly. Like we hold both the love and the grief, and neither goes away. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. So, okay, so that I remembered you sharing that as well in our interview and how it affected me at the time, that beautiful story. But you've had other moments. You've had some profound dreams with
Mm.
both of your parents, and I wonder if you could share a little bit about that because I think when we talk about after death communication with our loved ones, very often the most common way that people will have that initial connection, at least, is through a dream. And from what I gather in my interviews with people, these dreams feel different to typical dreams.
Yeah. Um, my oldest brother died in very difficult circumstances. He was in the neurological ward. He was never going to snap out of the state that he was in. And after he died, it was, I think I was expecting an experience like I had when my dad died. And all I got was this sense of confusion and being in a fog and being lost and him not knowing what was going on. And it was incredibly painful because his death was so hard and so painful. Um, to be continued to be haunted by that after he died, of not having a sense. I thought, with my dad, he would finally be free and I get a real sense of that. But no, it was the exact opposite. He was still trapped. He was still stuck. He was still confused by where whatever was going on where he was. Now, my mother died not too long after that. It was about 9 months after he died. She died. And that's when I had the dream about her meeting him in this grey, foggy, confused, sad, desperate place where he was and leading him out, leading him, I say towards the light for want, for want of a better expression, but towards peace, actually, I think, more than anything else. No, she was the mother, he's the son, he's her firstborn. She was there when he was born. She carried him with him and with her, and now she carried him from this other state into the next. And it was just so perfect. And I really got the sense that he was okay now. He was all right. I didn't get the glorious sense of connection that I had with my dad, but it was a completely different relationship. He was, my older brother, 10 years older than me, all that kind of stuff. But at least he wasn't trapped as he was in life and as he was for many months after he died.
Yeah, so you had again an experience, a spiritual experience in the form of the dream, gave you gave you some solace and some relief in that moment. Yeah.
Mm,
And
very much so.
yeah, and that's what I find amazing, the tangible effects of these experiences. Yeah.
Can I just tell you another dream I had after my dad died? And this one's kind of funny.
Please.
So, we were all very sad. There was a lot of grief around his, and my mum was completely broken. They were going to spend their retirement together, and he died at 61. And I did have a dream, and we were all in this little country church, and Dad was there, and he was alive, and we were all kind of surprised. And I sat down next to him and saw he was reading a book. And it was really thick, like it was a really thick book. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm so glad that this book is as long as it is, because he cannot die until he finishes reading the book. He was already dead. But, it was just like, he'll stay with us. He will stay with us for a while longer because he can't die till he finishes reading that. And it's a really long book.
What do you think that was pointing to? What do you think
Uh,
he was reading?
um, well, it wasn't the Bible. I know that for a fact. It was, look, from the size of it, it was probably a fantasy novel, but I actually don't know. I just know in that dream it was a big book. It was fiction. I was sure it was fiction.
I'm just asking because I just had this thought, oh, imagine your dad was showing you in that moment what's coming for you.
Oh, I'd never thought of that.
Yeah, like what's coming for you, a big book, like, and you thought it was fiction, and it's not going to end because this is your career coming up. But it was still a while away in terms of our linear concept of time. But he's not involved in linear concept of time anymore, where he was.
I have goosebumps. Honestly, I had never thought of that. Wow, thank you.
You're welcome. It did occur to me, and sometimes these things pop into during interviews, and I'll share them. And yeah, I'm happy. I just feel strongly that he was showing this is coming for you.
Mm, thank you. Amazing.
So let's see. So I think you've touched on this a little bit, but how did these experiences shape your relationship with grief, and did they help you heal?
There was a lot of healing around those experiences, but honestly, with grief, it's an interesting one because it does take so long, and then it echoes. There are echoes of things that come up and take you unawares when, sorry, take you unawares when you're not expecting them, and really kind of sit you down on your bum again. It's like, wow, I thought I had moved on a bit further than that. And that's why I do think it was a real gift when someone said it never goes away. So not to have that expectation that you're going to feel better within a particular time frame. But for me, it was also a gift having those dreams or having that real sense, knowing in my soul that my mum and then my brother and my dad, that they're all okay. It was all right. Eventually for my brother, it was all right.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that too, because we'll have so many audience members listening who are on a grief journey or living with grief. And yeah, I'm grateful to you for sharing that you have, yes, these moments of solace. However, there's no timeline to this, to grief. And I love what you say about how it echoes and takes you unawares. That's actually quite beautiful, although in the moment it might be challenging to experience.
Mm.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about your experiences with meditation, which you chronicled in your wonderful memoir, Sex, Drugs, and Meditation. I'm just wondering what meditation offered you that nothing else could. And I also remember, Mary Lou, when we did our initial interview and you were telling me about the experience of the silent meditation retreat that you went on, that you write about in your memoir. I think you had at least one very profound experience within the meditation that, I don't know, kind of fast tracked you into a more of a healing space. Does that ring a bell? Am I remembering that correctly?
I had so many realizations and breakthroughs through doing it's a Vipassana meditation. So it's a
Mm.
silent 10-day meditation. I had actually started meditating before then. I spent a lot of time in 12-step programs, and meditation is one of the steps, prayer and meditation. to maintain that spiritual connection to,
Mm.
your choice of a higher power, whatever you decide that is for you. Um, so I had some experience with that. I had a very full-on job in commercial radio for a while, and it was really getting to me. And I read a book called Secrets of the Rainmaker, and it starts off with the story, in an African village of a rainmaker coming to town, pitching his tent and going into his tent, and he doesn't come out for days and days and days. And the people in the village are getting restless. They think he's a fraud. The rain hasn't come. They're still in drought. And they're about to boot him out and, not pay him. And then the rain starts. And it's a miracle. And they say to him, what's that about? And he said, I had to spend that time getting myself into a state of alignment with nature, with heaven, with the rain. And I love that story. And in essence, it's, be the change you want to see in the world. But it takes time, and people might get cranky with you in the meantime. But for me, meditation, so I was getting up at like 3:30 in the morning. I was doing the breakfast shift as well as being the music director. This is in commercial radio, as well as being the assistant program director. My days were insane, but I would get up a half an hour earlier. I would light a candle. I would sit in front of this tiny little altar I'd made in the corner of my bedroom, and I would just meditate. So at least I had one part of my day that was still. I mean, my mind would race, but I wasn't doing anything. No one was demanding anything of me. I wasn't, talking to an audience through the medium of radio. It was just that time for me. And I kept that up. So when I had such a horrible experience with ABC radio, it was just dreadful. Vindictive and vicious. I couldn't understand. I really couldn't understand it, how people behave that way. And I knew that I could not change other people, places, or things, thanks to the Serenity Prayer, which is a big part of 12-step programs, that the only thing I could change was myself. So here's me. I'm a type A personality. I've been a workaholic for much of my life. Luckily, that's gone now. And I used to get paid to talk. So I used to talk for a living. And my colleagues ended up taking a sweep because they didn't think I would last 10 days at a silent meditation retreat. But I saw it as my last resort because I couldn't think or work or talk my way out of this situation. All these tools that I had did not work as this type A workaholic personality. Did not work. And so that's why I decided, and a few things, and it's all in the book, led up, a few delicious pieces of synchronicity led up to me going. I didn't even know there was a Vipassana center on the Sunshine Coast where I was working. It had to be pointed out to me by an old friend from Sydney who was passing through. I had no idea. And I had wanted to do Vipassana since I was in Sydney. The spark had been lit by a friend who went and hated it and left after 3 days. And she told me about it, and I'm listening to her and I'm thinking, oh, I think I might like to do that. And people who read the book have a kind of similar response. There's half who think, I never want to do that, and the other half go, oh, I really want to do that. But I was desperate enough to go and sit in silence. And it's not the silence that's the troubling thing, even though my work colleagues thought it would be. It's the pain. And that's part of the process, the physical pain. It's tough, but it passes. And that is the big lesson, is that this too shall pass, which is, I think from Christianity, from religion, but it's also in this non-secular meditation technique. It will pass, and it does. And it's a bloody miracle when it does, because honestly, That especially that first time I did it, oh, the pain, I tell you. But I had many, many breakthroughs, many realizations. The teacher describes it as a surgical operation of the soul, that you are allowing all this stuff that's been buried, suppressed, and has putrefied. You're kind of slicing it open and letting it all out and getting rid of it. And it certainly feels that way. But I think one of the biggest realizations also came in a dream. And um, because you're meditating like 14 hours a day, the teacher says you're not going to sleep as much as you usually do. Um, but when you do sleep, you will probably have dreams, and I certainly did. And this one was about a particularly troublesome relationship I'd had in my 20s. Um, and he was in this dream, and it involved another woman I hadn't met, and he was with her, and both of them had these massive hooks in their skin, like great big barbed hooks through their skin. And I looked at myself and I realized that I had these hooks through my skin too. And she turned to me because I was in this anxious, heightened, jealous state because he was with someone else, her. And she looked at me and she said, "He's not yours. He never belonged to you." And in this dream, I went, "He never belonged to me. He was never mine." All that jealousy, all that control, trying to control him and what he did, all this fear, he never belonged to me. And in the dream, all the hooks fell out. They just fell away. I felt so free. Like, yeah, I never owned him. I could never control what he did. All it did was make me sad and angry and scared. Yeah, like he never belonged to me. No one belongs to us. No one else belongs to us. And we hook ourselves in by thinking they do, and it causes us pain.
Wow, that's so powerful, and what an image, those hooks. And it's
Mm.
interesting that all three of you were hooked.
Yes.
Yeah, so our perception of, like, even though it's dressed as love, perhaps you love this man and you fear that he's with this woman, that hooks all three of you in a negative kind of loop
Mm.
somehow. Yeah, our perception can do that. That's really interesting what your dream, yeah, demonstrated. And I love how they just fell away.
It fell away. The other thing that became very apparent to me, and I ended up doing 10 Vipassanas, 10-day silent meditation retreats. But the other thing that became apparent to me is that I do have an incredibly addictive personality. And sometimes when I was meditating, quite often actually, I would just invent scenarios in my head that would cause me fear and pain and grief and panic. And that would cause a physical response in my body, that heightened sense of anxiety and what's going to happen. And, making all this stuff in my head up, which wasn't real. And the teacher talks about this. This is what we do. We create our own devils in our head. And then we react to them as if they're real. And they're not real. They're not based in anything. And for me, that physical intensity of those thoughts, the effect it had on my body, I realized that I was actually addicted to that physical sensation as well.
Mm.
And what I needed to do for my own well-being and sanity was realize that that's what I did. And then when I started catastrophizing or making up scenarios or whatever, it's like, you're after some kind of hit here, an emotional hit. This isn't real. Let it go. And that was a real revelation to me. It was kind of mind blowing that I just turn on this emotional state to get some kind of hit. It's not good for me. It doesn't feel good, but that's how I lived. Yeah.
It's so insightful that I guess the freedom comes when we're able to actually witness these patterns within ourselves. And it first requires that witnessing for us to then be able to let it go. And I guess the experience in the meditation, the 10-day meditation, and how amazing that you went on to do 10 of them. that's that's really something. I guess that it really serves for that, doesn't it? Because you're sitting there and all of it's coming up
Yeah.
for you to see. Yeah. I was just going to ask before, do you think we're more open to experiencing the spiritual dimension of life when we are in a crisis?
I think I can only talk about my own experience here.
Mm.
A crisis comes because I cannot think, reason, or work my way out of a situation. And those to this day are always where I'll go first. I'm a smart, intelligent person. I have a lot of experience. I can think my way out of this. I can work it out. I can come up with a solution. When all of that breaks down, that's a crisis for me. And that's exactly what drove me to meditation. None of that worked. It all broke down. And I had to do something radically different. And it involved looking at my own stuff, being there for myself, divorcing myself from my persona, if you like, this person in the world, um, the way that I wanted people to think of me, all that stuff had to fall away. It all comes back again. It always does. But for a while, it had to fall away so that I could find a different way of being in the world, a way of not managing is kind of a bit of a dull and heavy and boring word. So I'm going to say enjoying, enjoying the situation instead of dreading it, or it being so much lighter than it was. But for me, the spirituality comes because the other stuff, the head stuff, doesn't work. I want it to work. I try really hard to make it work. It doesn't work.
But I think as I hear you say that and you describe being a type A personality and a former workaholic, I kind of think kudos to you for like allowing the possibility that a solution outside of that toolbox could work. And I think we all know people who perhaps we love them and that makes it even harder, who just won't. They're not ready to look at their stuff. It's it's very brave and hard to do. So
Look,
yeah,
and I can totally understand people who don't want to look at their stuff. You know, it's
yep.
it's hard, it's demanding, and I can really understand people being hesitant about taking a different path. We So I was being interviewed about the way I live with this slow travel thing all around the world and stepping out of my comfort zone. And I said, what I do is far enough out of my comfort zone as it is. I actually like being comfortable. I want to be comfortable. I I I don't see anything wrong with actually wanting to be comfortable. It's nice. It's nurturing. It's lovely. And yes, I do, like getting on the back of a scooter in Asia constantly, that kind of stuff is way out of my comfort zone. But I'll do it. And even, writing and publishing a book, it's a very different experience and way of being in the world. It's so much easier just to be comfortable and read other people's books, which I also do a lot of and I totally love. So, yeah, that's what I was saying. It's when nothing works that you've done all your life. That's why it takes a crisis, I think, to look
Mm,
at another way.
mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I also love being comfortable, cozy and comfortable, preferably.
Yes, yes.
Um, so I'm wondering now, I'd like to shift into your writing. And before I ask about the spiritual dimension of writing, I'd love to just ask you about what role writing has played your entire life. I'll give you an example. For me, it's been my constant companion, and it's been there for me when I've felt that everything else is crumbling. And this has probably been since I could, I was old enough to pick up a pen or pencil. So for me, it's just like my bestest buddy. But how would you describe the role of writing throughout your life?
Not like that.
Mm.
When I was with the ABC, I did a segment every week called the Gutenberg Experience, which was about books and writing, and I would interview authors. And there were so many authors like you who knew from the day dot, from the womb even, that they wanted to be a writer, and that was not me. When I was 18, I started playing in bands, and after a while, I wanted to write my own songs. So I was writing songs from the age of 18, 19. But novels, longer form, no, never. So right until my mid-30s, and I was still playing in bands and I was still writing songs. I wanted to be a famous singer-songwriter. I did train as an actor as well, but after I'd finished acting school at the VCA, I went straight back into playing in bands. That's where my heart was. Um, and so that was my passion for so long. And I accidentally became a writer of prose. It wasn't something that I dreamed of or planned or felt connected to at all. And quite honestly, it's something I had to work very hard at. Here's me, type A personality, workaholic. And I did writing workshops and retreats and master classes. I had manuscript assessments, working with mentors. I wrote three books that were my practice books, my failed novels, my practice books, because I'm a slow learner and I just kept going. I persevered. So it wasn't, necessarily a natural, lovely, constant companion thing. I've always been a creative person, and this is the next thing. When I got into radio, after I left music behind, pretty much there was a little bit of an overlap, but not a lot. People said, "How can you just step away from that great passion of your life?" I said, "Because I have another passion, which is radio." And then after 20 years, I was not feeling so passionate about radio, and I'd already started writing, and my memoir had come out, and I thought, this is what I'm passionate about now is writing, and I'm just going to keep doing it, whatever happens.
Your story also speaks to how our passions can shift and evolve with
Mm,
life as well, and how,
yeah.
again, like I feel that there's a bravery to you for stepping into, I mean, even just what you described about learning, like that writing process, that learning about novels and what makes a good novel. Many, many of us would give up. Like you wrote three practice novels. Like that's serious dedication. I love that message, and it's very good for me as I plow through the sixth year of I'm trying to write my first novel.
Oh, wow. Yes, just
Taken
keep
6 years
going.
so far.
Yeah, honestly, I was working at the ABC and I wanted to find out whether I could finish a novel and if I could, if I wanted to do it again. And I took 6 months leave without pay. I saved up my money. And all those years of being a musician and an actor and living on nothing came into good stead. So I finished the novel and I went, I really enjoyed that. I want to do that again.
Was that one of the ones that was published?
No,
Okay. Yeah.
absolutely not. No, and I had my publisher kind of sounded me out about those three failed novels recently. And I was like, nope, no, no, no.
Mm. Wonderful. So I want to weave in because we touched at the beginning of our conversation on how there is a kind of magical, mystical piece to writing. So you write fiction, you tell these stories. Do you feel, Mary Lou, like you're creating them or you're receiving them?
I think perhaps I align more strongly with I'm creating them because I do think creating does plug into something greater than myself. But I'm also aware of the work that's involved. So, and this just might be semantics. I mean, receiving feels to me like you're getting something and there's no work involved and it just flows. That doesn't happen for me. I'm not a plotter, so often the story will take me places I'm not expecting. I've been known to burst out laughing because I did not expect my characters to do that. I still don't think that's receiving. I still think that's an act of creativity that I am in the flow. I'm not so sure if that's the right terminology, but I'm certainly not blocking anything from happening. I'm open to my characters making their own decisions, doing things I wasn't expecting. But that to me is an act of creativity. It's more than craft. Yes, you've got to know your craft and you can study that. Creativity is a completely different dimension. And it's such a joyful place to be in the unexpected world. It is. It makes all the work worth it.
So true. There is a beautiful joy that comes from just sitting there and seeing what emerges on the page. I find that too, is even as this process drags on for me of the novel that I'm trying to write. But um, yeah, and would you say that you've come close, or that you've been in that, famous flow state, what we aim for, where outside world melts away and it's just you and your story?
That does happen. It really does. I also love those little moments of synchronicity that come up when you are writing a story and you get some other piece of information and it fits absolutely perfectly, and you go, oh, wow, look at that. And you really feel as though you're on the right track because you've been given presence along the way from, the world of creativity, the muse, whatever you want to call it. These little presents, little
Do you
gifts.
have do you have an example of one of those moments to share?
Oh, look, honestly, I'm sorry, not off the top of my head. But the little unexpected moments or the little facts that come in. Yeah, I can't be too specific about it, but it has happened multiple, multiple times.
Yeah, yeah, no, I understand. So your latest novel, The Hobart Hotel, which is the one that we talked about at the beginning, which has become an instant bestseller. Well done, Mary Lou. It's partly set in Uruguay, which is where I was born. And I wondered, like, if you could share a little bit about how that piece happened, how you came to weave Uruguay into your book and then into the story, and then a little bit about just kind of if you have any memories of magical, mystical things happening while you were there in Uruguay.
It was quite extraordinary, actually. So my husband and I slow travel the world. We want to spend a great deal of time in South America. We thought we'd go to Argentina first, but Malay had just got in and he had kind of he modeled himself on Trump, and we weren't quite sure what was going to happen. So I said to my husband, let's just sit over the River Plate in Uruguay and watch. Uruguay's just over sorry, Argentina's just over the river there. So we can, we're close to see what happens. And, if we feel like, yeah, we do want to go after all, we'll go then. And we just fell in love with Uruguay. I wasn't expecting to, despite the fact that it's so expensive. We knew it was going to be more expensive than anywhere else in South America. We didn't know it was going to be more expensive than Australia. And the main reason we can afford to do what we do, because we're considered low income earners in Australia, is we go to places with a lower cost of living than Australia. So to be in Uruguay where it's higher than Australia, it was like, oh. But we liked it. We met great people. We were trying desperately to learn Spanish and failing miserably. We spent the first month in a Spanish school trying to learn it. Oh, so hopeless, so hopeless. I had extra lessons and all kinds of stuff. Nah, just didn't come. But I had been thinking about writing a book about the Rest Point Hotel Casino in Hobart, which was Australia's first legal casino. But it wasn't enough for a book. And honestly, it does take such a lot of time and work to write a novel, as you know, um, that I really have to have something very strong and very heartfelt and something that I'm really passionate about before I'll embark on it. even if my publisher's like after me to give them something else. I'm like, no, actually, I need to find the right idea. And so I didn't have anything. I left, I think it was a book tour for the Chocolate Factory, and they'd just accepted the jam maker. But I didn't have an idea that I could give to them straight away. But this is bubbling away, and I started researching the Rest Point Casino and the site, and I discovered the Rest Point Riviera, which was a beautiful Art Deco hotel, which is on the original. It's still there, thank goodness, but it's kind of surrounded by other stuff now, much harder to see. And that opened in 1939. And then we're in Uruguay. We're in Punta del Este, which is a seaside town. And I find out that just off the coast where we're staying, the first naval battle of World War II happened. And my mind was blown. I'm like, what? How? It's, 1939, World War II is only a few months old. All the action is happening over in Europe. It hasn't come into even the Pacific yet. And here we are in Uruguay and the first naval battle. I mean, that's just bizarre. So, of course, I had to look into it. And when I did, I discovered that it happened in the very same week as the opening of the West Point Riviera. And that's one of those joyful little bits of synchronicity. And that was the spark. And I just went, now I have a novel. Now I do. It's my first dual timeline, but I have this whole story that starts at the opening of the West Point Riviera in 1939 and goes to Uruguay, 1940, early 1940s. And the other timeline is the opening of Australia's first legal casino following a Hobart small town girl who becomes involved with it. And I do a lot of research for my novels, and I spend a lot of time, usually in the State Library of Tasmania, doing a lot of research and a lot of stuff online as well, and also interviews with people. But I'm in Uruguay. I don't speak Spanish, and most of the stuff around, Uruguay in the early 1940s is all in Spanish. Like, there's no point. I have no idea how I'm going to research this, and I really need to get this history right. But I did track down a couple of academic articles and a few other bits and pieces, and I got information. I made friends with an elderly Argentinian who was a bit of a history buff, and one of his friends was the former British consul to Maldonado, which is where it's the province where Punta del Este is. And he gave me all this information as well about what the US was doing there, and had all this other information about what about how Germany wanted Uruguay. So Germany wanted Uruguay, the Nazis wanted Uruguay, the US wanted Uruguay. It's such a small country, but so pivotal in the Western Hemisphere with its deep port, and had the Fray Bentos meat works, which was supplying bully beef to the Allied forces. A tiny country, and yet so powerful in the scheme of things. I was just fascinated by it, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. And it's the place of your birth, it's your homeland.
It is. And I went back for the first time in almost 30 years in February of 2025. And it was just a truly just magical and beautiful and just kind of love drenched experience. And, immigration is something that severs family ties. And you don't really realize this as the immigrant, especially when you come at age 2, like I did. But
Mm,
going back there for the first time, not for the first time, but this was the first time that I understood the collateral damage for the ones left behind as well, because I was very, I guess, conscious of the damage to the ones here and the ripple effects of that, but I'd never really considered the damage to the ones left behind as well in the process of immigration. So I did get a good sense of that when I stayed with my aunt in Piriápolis, which is a
mm.
kind of magical place founded by a purported alchemist and mystic. And yeah, so I think that figures in your novel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Spiriapolis does feature. There's several chapters there, and it's a fabulous town. It really is. I loved it. But all the mystical, alchemical stuff I couldn't put in the book. And this is the thing with historical fiction, I do so much research and so much of it doesn't end up in the book. I find it all fascinating and it's lovely. And, we went to periods castle and all that kind of stuff. But in the book, she just drives past and she sees my character Sabine drives past on the way to Periopolis and sees the gates. That's as far as it goes. And I'd done all these detailed photos and made notes and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, but there is a lot about the Hotel Argentino where she stays and about the boardwalk, which it's beautifully built and it is like straight out of Europe, straight out of the Riviera. It's an amazing town.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, very, very beautiful, and I hope to go back again soon, sooner rather than later. So we've talked a bit about this, what seems to me like the spirit of place. Like places do have a spirit, and I just wanted to touch on Hobart a bit, being your hometown, and how would you describe the spirit of Hobart?
It's an interesting one for me because as a young person growing up here, when Hobart was really the daggiest place in the world, 50 years behind the mainland. I mean, people make jokes about us. Luckily, the Tasmanian jokes have kind of fallen away, but I had to spend a lot of my life just putting up with the two-headed and hillbilly and everyone related and all that stuff. Boring, boring, boring. Um, and to see it change completely in my lifestyle, in my lifetime, has been astounding. But Tasmania itself, because I did the thing that a lot of us did when as soon as I was 18, I left because I could. I had a very tumultuous year in Sydney and I fled Sydney and came back here. And I played in bands and I acted and then I left and my dad died and that changed my life again completely and I came back. I also came back for just briefly for the Port Arthur Massacre Memorial, which had a profound effect, I know, on Australia, but especially on Tasmanians. It just completely broke us. But when I found out in those initial hours that it had happened at Port Arthur, my response was, I'm not surprised
Mm.
because that is a place of misery, torture, and scars. The psychic wounds are deep there, but the psychic wounds in Tasmania are deep as well. Quite often, when I would come back and if I'd drive into the country, I would just feel so profoundly sad, incredibly sad, a deep melancholy in this place. Some of that has really lifted now. I get the sense because I grew up in a time when we were told that all the Tasmanian Aboriginals were dead, that we killed them all, genocide. So that has completely changed. The local inhabitants, the original inhabitants, are completely acknowledged. And I think a lot of that hopefully has lifted some of that psychic burden. And of course, Tasmania has, I was going to say, it's been greenwashed. Some of it is absolutely not true about it being clean green. I could talk about the salmon industry, but let's not go there. Um, but it does have this reputation now of being this beautiful, clean island, cleanest air in the world, all these beautiful hikes, gorgeous food, great food producers. None of that was a thing when I was a kid. None of it at all. So it is a very different Tasmania that I return to every time I come back on book tour. A very different Tasmania, but I am rooted in a time that's mainly the 70s, early 80s, because I'm 65 now, um, of what it was like back then. And there was lots of great stuff as well. But my first book, The Last of the Apple Blossom, starts with the 1967 bushfires, which was so traumatic, and some people are still traumatized by that event. It was massive. Um, and then the demise of the apple industry in Tasmania. Now, we were the apple isle, and it all just fell completely to bits in 1973. So that's a big book full of lots of grief. And I think, it kind of reflected my relationship with Tasmania at the time. And now So this is my fourth novel, The Hobart Hotel. It's just this glamorous book that is, I look, in the 1973 timeline, there is a lot of grief and sadness, and actually in Sabine as well. But the main focus is glamour and excitement and espionage and spies. It's such a completely different vibe. And I think it in a way, it traces my growth and evolution with my relationship with Tasmania in a way. So having said that, my next book's going to be really quite different again. I'm not sure what that says about my relationship with Tasmania, but we'll find out when that one comes out.
Oh, I was going to ask you about your next book. Is that also set in Tasmania?
Yes. So, look, with the slow travel thing, a lot of people said, are you going to be writing books set in countries you go to? I never thought I would until Uruguay completely captured me. That was a total surprise. But this next one is completely set in Tasmania. The subject matter, it's about something that's produced in Tasmania and it's not produced anywhere else in the world. It's purely and uniquely Tasmanian, and that is leatherwood honey. All the leatherwood is in the west and the northwest and the wilderness areas. And the other thing that Tasmania is very famous for in that area is the Franklin blockade. So the whole campaign, I think it was the biggest direct action campaign in the world at the time. It was phenomenal. But the whole debate over the Gordon Below Franklin Dam really fractured Tasmania, fractured it. And so it's a very difficult book to write, which is why I'm thinking it's interesting about my relationship with Tasmania and how it evolves through my books. I had the idea for this book 5 years ago, and I think I'm only brave enough to write it now. It's going to be very tricky indeed.
It sounds like it'll be in contrast to the Hobart Hotel, which is kind of like the glam. And I saw that you attended an event wearing an amazing showgirl outfit. Like I love that.
Yes, one of the original Rest Point showgirl outfits. And I was not topless, if that's where you're going, but it was a fabulous feathered headdress and this great cape with feathers on it. And the book before this one, it's called The Jam Maker, and Henry Jones of IXL, his story is woven through it. And we had the launch at the Henry Jones Art Hotel, which is just beautiful. And so for the Hobart Hotel, we had the launch, in the showroom at the Hobart Casino, and it was incredibly fun and glamorous. And I was having a meeting with Fuller's and with my publicist, and they're going, "So where's the next launch going to be?" And I said, "Well, given the theme, think wilderness, rainforest, rain, most definitely leeches." And they're like, "Oh."
Right. Yeah. So we are coming to the end of our chat, and I would love to just ask you, just to tie it back into a neat bow, have you had any spiritual moments that have been notable in the years since we did our interview that you would like to share that you think are relevant and yeah.
I'm going to share one amazing moment, and it was on one of the dates where the world was supposed to end. People actually thought it was going to happen. We've had many such dates. But my husband and I were in Scotland, and we were staying by a loch in a white hotel that had all these spiritual pictures everywhere. And it had the most extraordinary vibe. And one of those twilights that went on forever. And as if we were suspended in time and space in this spiritual hotel. It was really quite odd. And I actually became convinced that the world had ended and we had died. And a lot of people thought they would ascend on this particular date. And I thought, it's happened. It's actually happened. I don't believe in these, world is going to end dates at all, but I have friends who absolutely do. Um, but it was such a strange experience to be almost in a hotel that had seemed to have just manifested out of nowhere on the shores of a loch. and we were there. It was otherworldly, otherworldly indeed. And that stayed with me for quite some time. And, you know, in some moments, I could absolutely convince myself that the world did end, that we did ascend, and everything since then has been in a completely different space and time. Who knows? Who knows? I have no idea. Some things are beyond reasoning, beyond my type A brain. I have no idea.
The delicious mystery of life. Yeah. And so, do you feel like your understanding of the afterlife, for instance, has expanded, evolved over the years?
I'm, look, I'm greatly comforted, as we have established. I like being comfortable, um, by the experiences that I've had, with my dad after he died, especially. That it's not a big, scary, dark hole, or as Kerry Packer said, there's nothing there. I do believe there is something. I have no idea what. And honestly, to be frank, sometimes that scares me because I do like being in control. And I am pretty sure I'm not going to be in control after I die, whatever it is, wherever we go, whatever happens. That's the thing that scares me. Nothing else does. It's just like, I like to control things. I like to know what's going on. And, that'll all be gone. And that's the only thing I struggle with. It's like, just
Yeah.
let it go. It's out of your control. It's out of your powers. Yeah.
Yeah. That vast unknown. And so let's wrap up our conversation with the second last question. What does it mean to you to live a creative life that's aligned with the spirit or the soul?
I honestly think that everyone's creative. Some people are just better at suppressing it or not believing it or not trusting themselves. And I honestly believe that creativity is a direct connection to something other than ourselves. So some of us are more open to it than others, but it's within us all. Just as a soul is within us all. I think creativity is part of the soul. Um, I'm just grateful that I'm desperate enough for attention. That's the first thing that came into my head, that I will allow that creativity to flow. And I've been on the stage since I was 6, and I love going on book tour and just talking about my book. And then I also love hiding away in a room on my own, making stuff up and connecting to that creativity 100,000%. Yeah. So, like everything, I think it's the yin and yang. Creativity demands a lot of time alone, mostly. My favorite contemporary composer is Arvo Pärt from Estonia, and he will go away and meditate. And I really do find meditation such a great way of connecting to that creativity. I mean, I used to say to people, if you have writer's block, go do a Vipassana meditation. You will not be able to stop the ideas from coming up. It's just phenomenal. For the last of the apple blossom, I could not figure out a happy ending. I just couldn't. It was such a tragic time for primary producers in Tasmania, the people who'd built this state. Um, and I went away to a Vipassana meditation with that intention. And yes, it came. I found the ending. When I got out of my own way and my own fears and my own concerns. And yes, I found the ending at a meditation retreat.
It's a wonderful piece of practical advice for all the would-be novelists, would-be creators among us, yours truly included. Maybe I should go off and take myself to one of those meditation retreats, definitely. Mary Lou, the final question I'm going to ask you is the one that I ask all of my guests on the Spirit Sisters podcast, and that is, what can an encounter with spirit teach us about living feet on the earth today?
I think it's about the end of limitation. I, for one, am always putting limits on myself, even today. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I'm not smart enough for that. Um, And having that connection to something greater than myself takes a lot of that away. It just opens up a different dimension, a different way of thinking. I don't always want to. There's part of me that likes being stuck in my limitations. That's just a habit I have. Um, and also this thing about self-protection, which also is a big limiting habit of mine. So I'm not always open to it. Absolutely not. I put the walls up and go, no, piss off. Um, but there's a lot of joy to be found in letting those walls down and finding that other way of being and incorporating it as best I can with my limiting abilities, my limiting habits. Yeah. I would love to be more open. I would love to be in a spiritual state the entire time. It's just not me. It's not going to happen. And letting go of that expectation is really quite freeing.
Thank you for that response. And I think we're human beings, we're humans incarnate, and we're here to be human and experience human stuff. So I think, what you share around incorporating it, finding ways to incorporate it it's really helpful, because I don't think any of us really can master being the spiritual, leader every day of our lives. It's always a dance, a delicate dance. So and being human is a beautiful gift in the flesh, and I think there's a lot to appreciate with that too. So thank you so much, Mary Lou. It's just been such a delight to welcome you onto the show today. I wish you all the best with your writing, which you don't need my good wishes. You're well on your way.
I will take them. I will take all your wishes. Thank you. I will receive them.
Thanks again, Mary Lou, and until next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Sisters. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. And don't forget to rate and review the show. Have an experience you'd like to share with me? Find me on Facebook at Karina Machado Author. After all, there's nothing more powerful than a story.